name is Chinagoro, and I'm a project assistant with Nextier Power. On behalf of the Nextier Power team, I'd like to welcome you all to the May 28th Nextier Power Dialogue. To everyone attending the Power Dialogue for the first time, we say welcome. We are pleased to have you in our midst tonight. And to our regular attendees, we greatly appreciate the value you see in attending our monthly discussions. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the 23rd edition of the Nextier Power Dialogue themed Network Access, Mini-Grids and the Discourse Perspective. The discourse tonight is directed at sharing ideas and taking proactive measures to ensure that as plans are being put in place to expand the national grid network to reach areas that are already powered by isolated mini-grids, will be sure to maintain a symbiotic relationship between the mini-grids and the distribution companies. Tonight we have Mr. Luis Carlos Miro moderating the event. Mr. Luis Carlos Miro is the head of unit for the Sustainable Energy Access for the Nigerian Energy Support Program NESP. He has a background on international cooperation and European affairs and has worked for the European Commission and the Alliance for Rural Electrification. Presently, Mr. Carlos works at the head of components on sustainable energy access, both off-grid and on-grid, for the Nigerian Energy Support Program, which is co-founded by the European Union and the German government, and this is being implemented by GIZ in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Power, Works and Housing, Abuja. And the component provides inter alia advisory services to the federal and state government in Nigeria to create an enabling environment for private investment in off-grid solar mini-grid sector. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, please, as we welcome the moderator.
Now that Louise is seated, let me just welcome the rest of the panelists so that they can also take their very hot seats. Dr. Abdulsalam Oyusuf is the Assistant General Manager, Renewable Energy and Rural Electrification, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Now, for those who may be new, without NEC, everything we say is just talks. So this conversation is critical, or rather Dr. Abdulsalam is critical to the conversation. Let's put our hands together and make him better feel welcome. So when the privatization took place, the entire nation was franchised into 11 zones, 11 franchises. And one of the owners of that franchise, or representing the owners of the franchise, is here tonight, the Chief Operating Officer of Kano Electricity Distribution Company, Rahul Singh. Let's make him feel welcome as he comes to the stage. I call him my boss. About 7 years ago, when the landscape doesn't look like this, so almost no regulation, but as a youth who believe in Nigeria and the Nigerian dream, they decided and dared to believe and to blaze the trail. And actually, the company is leading in the mini-grid renewable energy space today. Let's put our hands together and make welcome Ifeanyi Orejaka, the founder and the CEO of Green Village Electricity GV projects. They've done about 5 million projects. Okay, with your permission, I'm going to join them on stage. And so in order to set the ball rolling, I'm going to call each of them to make about 7-8 minutes presentation, and I'll be starting with Ifeanyi Orejaka, who's going to speak on mini-grid developers. Are they complementing or are they competing with the discourse? And where is that whole conversation around the mini-grid and mini-grid developers, where is that situated within the larger frame of the power conversation and electrifying the 90 million Nigerians that are currently not connected anywhere. And is the hope a dim one? Is it a setting sun or is it a rising sun? We're going to find out all about that tonight. Let's put our hands together for Ifeanyi as he gets the conversation started.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So it's my honor and privilege to be seated here this evening to share some of our experiences and some of our insights in this very topical issue in mini grids. And very recently, there's been a lot of buzz around the mini grid technology, the mini grid business model, what it actually is and what it stands for, what is currently obtainable in the sector, and what is the near future of landscape for the model. So, but before I proceed, I would like to start with a bit of introduction about who I am and also the company I represent in GBE. Like said by introduced by the moderator, in 2007, precisely when I and my co-founders were interning for one of the leading oil and gas multinationals, undergraduate internship, precisely. We, on several facility inspection visits in the Delta region, observed that communities neighboring these facilities were in abject energy poverty. So we tried to figure out what could be done to actually provide electricity to these people. But they are productive in nature, they go about their normal activity, but during the day you see a lot of activities going on in this community, but once it's dusk, everything fizzles out. So we tried various solutions. So at the time we wanted to use technology that was readily available and seamlessly available across all the regions of Nigeria and also a global impact. So we narrowed down to the mini grid technology and precisely the PV solar mini grid technology. So at the time as young undergraduates with some mentorship from organizations like the IEEE, because I have an electrical electronics background, we tried to figure out what it takes to actually implement the project. We visited the regulator, we visited the Ministry of Power and Design, but lo and behold, nobody knew what the technology was. We were just running with our technology, nobody knew what it was. But notwithstanding, because of the passion we had at the time and because of the things we saw in this community, we decided to venture to actually kickstart this. And by September 2013, we completed our very first, which was a 6 kilowatt system, 100% grant funded. And we provided some level of details on how we went about that to the regulator. And they monitored this for a while, and judging from the impact they saw, they were confident. And as well as the nudge from our community to actually see to implementing this on a broader pedestal, which cascaded over the years to where we are now, discussing it on a national level. And interestingly, within the same period, we discovered that we happen to be the pioneers of technology, not just in Nigeria, but also for the West African sub-region. Fast forward 2013, we're now in 2018, different states of the country, and that places us as the leading mini grid developer in not just Nigeria, not just the West African region, but the entire sub-Saharan Africa. So to broaden our mind on what the mini grid actually is, for the benefit of those who do not know, it's actually a miniature, a scaled-down version of the conventional utility system we are all conversant with, but just that in this case it's serving a small cluster of households or clients or a cluster of communities. So going back to the question of the day, when we envisaged the mini-grid technology back in 2007, for us, we always knew that it was going to be a collaboration between mini-grid operators and the distribution companies. Why? Because in Nigeria, we have a very peculiar and very unique issue in our hands. Even if we solve all the complexities currently facing the grid, 55% of Nigerians, like me and you, would not have access to electricity. If it doesn't bother you, it deeply bothers me, and it motivates me to actually do what we do in GVE. And to buttress that point, we're looking at, with the current population of 190 million people, we're looking at slightly about 100 million people. So, to be able to solve such problem at that scale, all hands need to actually be on deck. And for us, we say more like a collaboration, or a collaborative effort to actually get all the parties to help in solve this national issue. Thank you.
Let's put our hands together for him. What he has just done on stage and what he's been doing in the bush, none of them is rather than easy. So let's just celebrate him for the accomplishment of the work. Like I said earlier, 5 years ago, we were made a promise by them and DP that the same miracle we saw in the telco sector, we're going to see in the power sector. And if you're Nigerian or you've lived in Nigeria like me, this is a hope we've carried since we were born. 5 years later, I want us to ask Raul, where are we going? Let's put our hands together and welcome Rural.
5 years later, here we are. Well, we have been making a lot of efforts towards primarily improving the supply to the people that we are already serving. Secondly, of course, to lower the losses in the system, to recover enough revenue to be able to pay for our power purchase and for our operational costs, as well as the regulated return to the shareholders. And actually, we are not yet there. There are certain fundamental structural issues that did not enable the distribution companies to raise enough capital for all the investment that was required to meet all the objectives within this 5 year period since privatization. Some of the key issues also related to the tariff, which almost everyone would say that is not cost effective and does not allow the discos to recover all their costs and meet all their obligations. That has been an ongoing historical fact. And in the concept note that you sent me, we talked about why are we not publicizing our network expansion plans. But to be quite frank, there are a number of agencies that we need to work with to see how we are going to expand capacity. One of the primary agencies would be the Transmission Corporation of Nigeria, and based on their own expansion plans, we'd like to expand our own capacity to serve in our licensed area. Currently, since 2014, our maximum capacity to offtake load from transmission is 380 megawatt. That is the interface between Kano Disco and the TCL. Numerous times in the past, at least since 2017, we have seen our peak load delivered that we are delivering to customers go beyond 350 megawatts to around 360 megawatts. That's the peak load that we deliver to customers during many periods. And so we do have currently enough and more downstream capacity to take on more load. since November 2014, a major piece of equipment, a 150 MVA 300 kV transformer, was burned, and nothing has been done so far to bring back that capacity to Kano. And Kano is also uniquely poised at the end of the grid, at the tail end of the last point on the grid. And we see that our operations also suffer a lot. Even right now, as we speak, I have been getting calls of voltage fluctuations and massive grid disruptions. And this is primarily because Kano has been used as a stabilizing factor for the rest of the grid. Anytime they need to do either frequency control or voltage control, Kano will be the one to either back down on the load or pick up load. And well, this does create operational problems for us. We have to instantly ramp up our load offtake or instantly back down. And linked to this is what we call a distribution network expansion plans. How do we expand when there are such huge constraints? Not only the capital that we require to expand to the areas that we have not reached, but how do we serve the areas that we have already reached adequately? There are numerous areas, rural hamlets where we have reached and we supply electricity where, for sometimes for days on end we are unable to reach them because there is not enough supply from downstream. There are certain feeders which we will not be able to pick loads for again for 2-3 days in a week at least because of various load constraints. So we have actually reached a much larger population than we have the capacity to serve right now. So even if we were to publicize our network expansion plans, it would not yield much result because every time we plan something, it keeps getting pushed, forward, further, until you do this and you do that. So a lot of our planning depends on an overall national plan, including generation, transmission, and then we link our own distribution and capacity expansion plans. We also work on, quality of power, reliability improvement plans. So, and 5 years ago, the network that we inherited was not in a great shape. It's not in a great shape even today, actually, quite frankly. We have made progress. We have stabilized the number of feeders, and we are able to provide on a number of occasions, depending on how the rest of the grid behaves. Sometimes uninterrupted power for at least 3-4 days at a time. And we have heard this from customers. We had several interactions with customers where NERC also had participated, and House of Representatives committee, the committee from the Senate. They have interacted with their customers and asked them directly. And from a number of areas within Kano city, within Katsina, within Dulce, customers have responded that they have seen light like never before. They say that, at least for last 1 week, we have hardly had any interruptions. So I'd like to believe that we have had quite a significant impact on the current distribution scenario. I also take pride to say that, in the current year, we have brought down our losses considerably. Last month, for example, our ATC loss was for the first time dipped below 45% from a high of nearly 60+%. And so I'd like to say that we are continuously moving forward and trying to improve our services. Secondly, on the topic of discussion today on the mini-grids, we welcome any mini-grid developer who comes along to us and would like to take over a certain area that we have not reached or where we don't reach adequately. We have no compunction about giving them the necessary permits as long as they deliver. So far, in the last more than 3 years that I've been in Kano, we have not been approached by a single entity yet. And we'd like people like GBE to come along to Kano because there are numerous opportunities there to serve people. Like you rightly said, mini grids generally, in my experience also, not in Nigeria but from India, where we have done smaller mini grids based on local resources, like solar, small wind power like 5 kilowatt turbines, and even mini hydro, micro hydro, kilowatt range, this thing. Where the network basically serves a small hamlet or a couple of communities clustered together. And the entire capital cost of such a project is generally entirely funded by some plan. Because the areas that they serve, the income levels are not high enough to sustain both the operational cost and the cost of recovery of capital plus return on investment. So, to my knowledge, even the ones that we did in a small village where we put up an anaerobic digester, where the community themselves, they have a lot of cattle and they use the manure to generate gas, and we run a small gas engine to supply electricity to all the homes, as well as clean cooking gas to the rural areas. And so I think we were able to do much, and we'd like to cooperate with any developer that comes along with the necessary capital to serve people in Kano. Thank you very much.
One of the things that Raul said, which at some point I would want Dr. Yusuf to respond to, he said the reason why they couldn't come up with their 5-year plan as stipulated by NERC is because every time they try to put a plan in place, the goalposts kept shifting. So what is NERC planning to do with that? But before we come to you, many of us are in Abuja, and even though they take light, the reality is in a greater portion of the country is not like this. So let's look at this statistically. REA, the Rural Electrification Agency, says about 90 million Nigerians don't have light. And they are not in that far off rural area that we don't know. So let me put it this way. In Ondo State, there are 18 local governments. 10 of the 18 local governments are currently not energized. 5 of these 10 had lights from the grid last 8 years ago. 5 were never connected at all. That's how close the statistics is. So it is inevitable that in order for these people to have some semblance of civilization, we cannot really wait for the traditional grid. We're going to listen to Louis to tell us what is the situation in other parts of the world in dealing with these realities. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having invited me to this event. I will answer that question together with the other questions that were mentioned in the brochure that was sent to me, but I will do it in a different way. So, on the issue of international experiences, yeah. The thing is, there are a lot of international examples, yeah, about how other countries have gone about mini-grids. It is Rwanda, for example, and Tanzania are often mentioned here in Africa. Yeah? But they are not the only countries. And the fact is, most of these experiences are theoretical. The fact is, in most countries at the moment where mini-grids have been developed, the mini-grids have been developed far away from the main grid. So cases where there was a main grid reaching the mini-grid, or cases where mini-grids were developed where the grid was already there, yeah, are very rare. Maybe in Asia there are a bit more of cases. But from my perspective, what I would suggest is always to look at the experience that Nigeria has already built. Nigeria has got several mini-grid projects. All of them are off-grid. I do not know yet about any interconnected mini-grid project, although there may be. And there is a regulation in place. And that regulation takes into account different types of scenarios. Actually, from my understanding, all the scenarios that can happen. Yeah. So the mini-grid regulations take into consideration, in the end, 5 possible scenarios. You have got a scenario whereby there is a mini-grid operator that has deployed a mini-grid somewhere. Then the grid comes, but as Rahul said, it may be that the grid does not have enough power to supply that community, or like the disco does not have enough personnel to service that part of the grid. Then the mini-grid operator can continue operating that grid in an interconnected mini-grid scenario. You can also have the situation whereby the mini-grid, the disco has enough power and has enough personnel to service that part of the grid, operate it and everything. So from there, you do not need the mini-grid operator. There is a compensation mechanism so that the mini-grid operator can leave. The other 2 scenarios in between are there is not enough power for the grid to provide enough supply to that community, and from there the disco tells the mini-grid operator, can you become a small power producer? Yeah? So there is the embedded generation regulation that would take care of that part. And the other scenario is the disco telling the developer, there is enough supply in the grid, but we do not have enough personnel to service this grid. Can you become a small distributor, power distributor, and from there you can go for the IEDN regulation. So the lost scenario is whenever the mini-grid operator does not have any permit, then there may be a situation whereby just the disco tells the operator just to leave, and actually the operator does not have any power to negotiate any other solution with the disco. But on the other cases, in all of them, there are so many possibilities for disco and mini-grid operators to collaborate, yeah, on many different possible combinations. I was also asked to speak about a bit about the issues that mini-grids, and especially interconnected mini-grids, may create. For isolated mini-grids, especially when it comes to this collaboration, yeah? One of the challenges that may arise when the main grid reaches the mini-grid is the mini-grid operator has deployed a distribution grid that is substandard, not according to the distribution code. What is the disco going to do in that case? They cannot take over that part of the distribution grid. So they will need to remove everything, or rather the mini-grid operator will need to remove everything and the disco will need to rebuild everything. This is why it is important to always build, to the extent possible, the distribution grid of the mini-grids in compliance with the distribution code. And actually this is what the regulation, at least it obliges those mini-grid operators that want to get the permit to go for that case. Then of course this becomes a challenge from an economic and financial perspective, because distribution grids compliant with the grid code are expensive. Yeah? But for that there are instruments like the REF that could be used to bring down costs. If you really want to have serve adequately a large village with a lot of productive users, you will need anyways to deploy 3-phase, and from there, I mean, you will need to comply with anyways with some standards. Yeah? On the generation side, I do not see any issues technically. Just, I mean, there may be some issues in case you want to have some kind of transfer of electricity between the section of the mini grid and the main grid. Yeah? But otherwise, the interconnected mini grids and isolated mini grids, technically on the generation side, they have proven that they can provide electricity reliably. Normally for off-grid solar mini grids, of course, you need the batteries, you need the diesel gensets maybe for backup. This makes things expensive, but technically it is not a problem. On the commercial side, it is again the same thing. So there is a framework there that allows for reflective tariffs. And this is also important in the case of interconnected mini grids. It's even more important because it will allow, in some cases, DISCOs to subcontract part of the grid to a mini grid operator, and the mini grid operator will be able to operate that part of the grid at a higher tariff. Which means that if a DISCO, for example, is running a rural grid at a loss, maybe in collaboration with the mini grid operator, they will be able to make some money. Because in the end, the mini grid operator may have to pay the DISCO for like like using part of like this distribution grid. On the social side, I see some problems. Yeah. When it comes to communities that have not experienced the main grid yet, probably not. The mini grid will operate at a higher tariff, but the people were not experiencing the main grid at very, very low tariffs before. For interconnected mini grids, it's a bit different. Yeah? You have been experiencing the main grid for some time. It is not reliable, but the tariffs are very low. Now, mini grid operator comes in with a very high tariff. Yeah? That's an issue. However, from our perspective, our experience, what we could say is people really, what they want is power. And they don't care about the price that much. If they do not have reliable power from the main grid, they will buy a diesel generator, or sorry, a petrol generator, for example, if they can. And that is very expensive. So from that perspective, probably the social issues will require a lot of dialogue with the community, but it's anyway something that is inbuilt in the business model of mini grids. On the issue on how to incentivize in the end the collaboration between DISCOs and mini grid developers, from my perspective, what I would say is the framework is there. There is the mini grid regulations from one side. It even includes the possible contractual arrangements, the legal templates for contractual arrangements between DISCOs and mini grid operators when it comes to, for example, the interconnected mini grids. On the other side, the REF is now operational and can provide grants for this kind of projects. To me, it's really majorly an issue of communication between the DISCOs and the mini grid developers. And it is not because they see each other as competitors, but just because probably they are operators, they are trying to go very far away from the DISCO. And then the DISCOs are really focusing much more on urban areas. The place where they will meet is peri-urban, rural areas like maybe towns where maybe there are some grids already, but they are not being operated and supplied properly. So interconnected mini grids will really be, from my perspective, the area where DISCOs and mini grid developers will start collaborating much more in the future. And as a suggestion, I don't know if this is anyways being done already by NERC, but one of the things that could be done also to incentivize all these things is the KPIs. So DISCOs have got access targets. Yeah? Is it? Would it be possible for NERC to, for example, allow DISCOs to include in their KPIs areas that are supplied by mini grid developers in collaboration with the DISCOs, so that like DISCOs are not doing the things directly. So this is only one question for you. And sorry, I've spoken a lot about the mini grid regulations, but it's just because I'm always so focused on framework. It's just technical deviation. I'm a political scientist, so I'm always thinking about policy, legislation, and regulation.
Thank you very much. Let's move on. a great job and set the ball rolling for Dr. Yusuf. Now, one of the things this cut across in all of the conversation, as we heard from them. Okay, let me come at it this way. One of the major challenges we've heard from mini-grid developers generally is that there is reluctance on the part of potential funders as to what is the future of mini-grids. And I know this conversation started from what the event we're coming from earlier today. After 5 years, and now you had Raul say that because of shifting goalposts, they are not even committed to the 5-year plan, which is a major part of this conversation. Now, if in 5 years and all of this happens, what is NERC prepared to do? What is NERC allowed to do? Because if we don't strengthen that framework on how interconnected mini-grid is going to work, then nothing is really going to work. I'm going to call on, and he's capable of discussing this, is the Renewable and Rural Electrification Director from Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, and he will be able to speak authoritatively on where NEC is vis-a-vis interconnected mini-grid in Nigeria today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. First, let me give a background on what the regulation is going to achieve, why it came on board, and then what are the areas that are highlighted by the speakers and how it will be addressed. Those who crafted the reform acknowledge that once you privatize things, then sending power to where you currently don't have power, means of getting it there. The private sector will not take power to rural area where you don't need to make returns on the investment. So the crafters of the acts provided for how this will be done. Create a fund called REF, Rural Electrification Fund, create an agency called Rural Electrification Agency. So these two are cardinal to getting power to rural areas. Then it's very recognized that even when you ask parents to take it up, then there will be need to make sure that investment they make, there is a framework for them to recover their investment. So the Act mandated NEC to provide for regulatory treatment of rural investments and schemes. So rural investment and schemes, NEC is mandated to provide regulatory treatment for it. So this is the basis for which the mini-grid regulation was developed. We know that the economics of rural investment generally is fragile. You don't have economy of scale, there are not enough consumers who are consuming and don't have enough financial funds to pay for services. So where do you come in as an investor to those areas? So on the other side are regulatory impacts, which are the bodies that someone who does business in the regulatory environment have to bear. So what Nextier is to come up with by providing light-handed regulation that makes it easy for the professional industry to reduce their burden, the regulatory burden they have to take in terms of reported itself of what they have to do, licensing requirements, entries and entry and exit requirements were scaled down and lowered down under this light-handed regulatory framework. Therefore, we had in 2017, a mini-grid regulation was approved by NEC. And one for the states. Now it comes to address some of the barriers that I mentioned, barriers of economic scale, barriers of what do we do with the investment after a while. And so we said first, anybody who wants to engage in mini-grid development have to first of all consider the type of service you want to provide, the size, and where you want to provide it. By size, we have said every mini-grid has to be below 1 megawatt because the Act requires that any generation above 1 megawatt must be licensed. So we do not want to take him through licensing process. We say, okay, let's take him off licensing, but let's take him below licensing threshold, which is 1 megawatt. So it has to be a permit, not a license. Because licensing requires some burdens that be difficult to meet for small-scale players. So we say it has to be a permit. And even if it's below 100 kilowatt, which is much smaller, then we don't even want him to bother about permit. We say just register with them. So for them, we need them to have registration, which is also a smaller, much easier criteria to fulfill. Meaning there's going to be any fee to be paid. Most of the requirements for meeting the permitting requirements are waived. So this is to make sure that if you go to a rural area to supply them power, those added costs you would have been bearing from regulation by taking it off to ensure that they eventually become economically viable in a way. Then we also allow the mini-grid operator to have cost-effective tariff at their own scale. Ordinarily, in the major, the discos have economy of scale and they have cross-subsidy. One type of a customer pay higher than the average tariff, some of them is below the average tariff, and because they have all of them in large numbers to subsidize each other. At the end of the day, you have a basket of tariff that they collect. Now, for the mini-grid operator, he doesn't have that large customers who can afford to pay 46 naira, or why somebody will pay 24 naira, somebody will pay 4 naira. He doesn't have that opportunity, he doesn't have that kind of scale. So you allow him to charge cost-based tariff and design his tariff as he chooses. Once the community agrees to pay that, and they sign off, then we approve on it. Or once they follow our methodology of calculating tariff, which is based on cost plus, the cost of providing the service plus the external investment, we will approve it as tariff for them. Now, how about if it's higher than what we pay in the urban area? People say, look, you are in the urban area, pay 24 naira, somebody in the rural area asking to pay 150 or 100 naira, how fair it is? And the fact is that we say that when people in the rural area currently don't have electricity, there is so much option they don't have, so much economies that cannot be brought up in those areas that will contribute to the economy of the country as a whole. Because the economy of the country as a whole also depends on what rural economy is. So if we are able to energize the economy of the rural area, then that will also help to provide a leverage for the national economy. Then the second one is that a lot of us in the urban area lose sight of that we consume by volume. While those in the rural area consume in small quantity because of the amount of gas that they have. So eventually what they pay per month, what they pay in reality, is not overweigh them as we think, but they give them a leap in terms of their lifestyle, in terms of what they can do, what they can engage in, activity they can engage in. It gives them the mileage. So it's a question of saying, do you want to, how much of not to have electricity and not develop, or tell them what is reflected so that the investor can go there. There is not the option of using the REF to do an upfront subsidy. The way REF can provide part of the network requirement. Because the mini-grid operator is a mini NEPA, it generates and distributes. This could can only distribute, they don't have license to generate, so they can only distribute. Where the mini-grid operator can generate and distribute, he can't do only one, he has to do it two. So in which case, if you can take part of it and fund the network, for example, from REF, for example, or from other funding, it brings down his cost, his total cost, because you only recover at the one he invests, not the fund from the REF. So this is how it was called. Then those things like ESIA, as the environmental assessment that is required. We also give them a kind of ease that look, they can take even the state ESIA, which is easier. You have category 1, category 2 projects. Even category 2 projects are still expensive for rural, for mini-grid operators. So we are not to take state ESIA, which is cheaper and easier, and it's approved, and we approve that. We also don't want to give them so much time, in doing the process of registration and getting a permit. They said, okay, once you apply online, submit all the documents required for you, all of you. Within 1 month, you will get a response from them. So you don't have to spend months or years developing licensing requirements and getting to meet licensing requirements as you in other places, in other areas. But in this case, within 1 month, once you submit all the documents required of you, within 1 month, you can get the permit to start operating your mini grid. If you are above 100 kilowatt, if you are below 100 kilowatt, from day one, once you register with NEC, from that day you can start operating. But we don't require you to actually have a permit to operate in the case of those below 100 kilowatt. Now, all these are ways we are trying to make it light-handed so that it will help to reduce the cost of supply, because every cost you put on the investor to pay will rather go to the tariff that will be provided from the customer. So while you are helping to make it easy for the investor, they are also using out the tariff for the consumers in the rural area and developing rural economies. Then, the aspect of 5 years, which you mentioned. The requirement in our market rule is that the discos are required to give us a 5 years plan. And that 5 year expansion plan is the basis for which we assess what investment they require, which we are putting on consumers to pay as tariff. So if they intend to put certain infrastructure in place, expand to some areas, extend to other areas, how many consumers they are going to put in additional ones, how long the new line they are going to put in place. We all are put together and we amortize over the lifespan of the assets and say this is the tariff that consumer will pay. Now, that 5 years plan is important for us for tariff purposes and also monitoring their investment and the progress they are making. For what we prioritize was that government is not able to make enough investment, so private people can make investment. So if they are making investment, we must be able to monitor it. So give us what we want to do. In the next 5 years, we'll review that tariff path to say, okay, this is tariff we're going to go in the next 5 years. Now, that is how we're also monitoring your reduction in losses and other KPI we have put in place. Now, if this co wants to be in town, maybe village ABC in 5 years, there is no need to allow the mini grid operator to go and identify that village. So we said, when you want to choose a village, make sure that it's not within the 5 years. Now, given the fact that we have 5 years now with cash from this group, we don't want new investors to go and invest in those 5 years within those areas. They will be in 5 years. So we say, okay, take that 5 years plan as the basis for excluding those 5 years area, go on the other place and invest. So that it's not that we're saying once you invest, it's only 5 years you require to cover. We are saying cut out, leave out those areas where they will be in 5 years. But we don't want any other village to keep waiting for the next 5 years of the disco. If you will not be there in my place in 5 years' time, then I can ask somebody to come and identify my village, rather than ask people to wait for the next set of 5 years plan. So this is why the 5 years was stipulated in the regulation that don't be within 5 years plan. Now, if you must be in 5 years time of disco, then you must go to the disco and get their consent that you want to invest in this. So please, even though within 5 years plan, disco should now give a consent that any consent, in which case we will come out to the disco's plan and remove that village or that community from their plan, and also equally decrease their capex, because that's the money they require to invest there, which somebody is not going to invest. So now, where is not within the 5 years plan, then if it is already connected, like in the other day when you have taking part to some distant village because some part who want power there, and currently they are not served, then our people can go and supply them power in that village, generate power from the village, supply them as integrated mini grids. If it has more than what they need, it can sell direct to the grid operator, and this is what we say by integrated mini grid. They are rare, as he said earlier, but it can happen. Now, as for where you don't have any other of electricity now, supply now, you have isolated mini grid projects in such areas, then they only need to agree with the villagers a tariff, sign agreement with the villagers, bring it to them, and we approve it, and that is all they need. So this is the way we have structured it. Discos on their own know that they cannot identify the whole of what is currently within their franchise areas, even in the next 10, 20 years. In fact, luckily, a disco like the Ibadan Disco sent us areas that are possible areas or possible sites or clusters that any grid operator can go. These are the kind of collaboration we want from discos. Let us know those within your franchise area. I think this village is far from my current grid area. I don't think I'll be there in the next 10 years. And it doesn't make economic sense to even go there. Of course, those of us who did planning power supply, as some villages that cannot be supplied, it doesn't make economic sense to take part in those places. Because, for example, if you have a village about 50 kilometers from the nearest grid, if they are close up to 100 maybe about 50 to 60 kVA load, any power you think they cannot recover in 20 years. Because the line you take there, the amount of wires cannot recover in 20 years. So it only makes sense that that kind of places can only be supplied with mini grid as upgrade supply. So there is no opportunity or no chance of this going there. It's not a play because the economics. So let the grid operator go there, supply them on their own terms, and they are regulated. All we need is it must be safe. We require that they conform with safety rules, and if they are going to be expecting that the school will take up that asset and pay them, it must be according to the distribution code so that it can be useful to the disco when they take it over. If it is something that they don't expect this to come there over time, they can use whatever standard of size of wires or that is filled for them, and we don't expect to conform with the distribution code in that case. And the school will not take it over because the school cannot take what's not useful to them. This is the idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As I was talking, I remember that, I realized I didn't introduce myself earlier when I was introducing them. So, my name is Deji. I'm the CEO of Protija Nigeria. We're a project development company and we focus on the C&I market, commercial, industrial to utility scale. You can clap for me too, thank you. Okay, so, yeah, clap for everybody else. Okay, so back to the conversation. A few things stood out for me while all the panelists were talking, and I would like us to start from there. Currently, NERC says 5-year plans, and used to spend some time talking about that. When Raul was talking, he was talking about why they're not publishing it. Now, having this 5-year plan is critical for planning on so many fronts. For instance, if I know today that my village is not going to have light from my disco in the next 5 years, I can decide to relocate and move somewhere else where there will be light. So at that granular level, we need that information. Question to to Raul, and eventually to Yusuf is this. What is the reason why today your 5-year plan, you're not publishing it? That's your question. And to Yusuf, is there a way to enforce the publishing of this 5-year plan? Because even project developers like us, GB, we need this information to plan. So I'll take you first and then I'll go to Yusuf.
As Yusuf has said, we have submitted our 5-year plan to the NERC at the time of tariff. And the capex that was allowed under my tool is a reflection of the 5-year plan that was submitted. We don't publish it mainly because how much of that plan can really be implemented depends on how much capital we can raise. We set on the norms of weighted average cost of capital, which assumes 30% equity funding and 70% loan funding. So, which means that, let us say my capex plan for 2018 was, let's say, 10 billion naira. 3 billion naira in equity funding and 7 billion naira in loans. We don't have that access to capital, and so even if we publish it, then we don't meet up to those projects that don't get funded and that don't get implemented, then people start asking, why are we paying this kind of a tariff? If you're not going to spend as much. Unfortunately, also on the other flip side, the plan doesn't really address, or the tariff doesn't really address the entire 5-year plan that was submitted. If you see what we get in Kano Disco, for example, we get an annual capex cap of 4.5 billion naira. That is not even enough to buy the meters to meet our metering obligation under the performance agreement. We need much more. So where does that leave any room for us to have network expansion? So unless we do a whole revision of how we front-end the investment in the network, and also have a tariff that reflects that investment that will go into the network and allows us to recover those costs. Although Mr. Yusuf did say that that is the framework under which the tariffs are determined for the utilities, but that doesn't really work out that way, because generally what has happened is that the regulator assumed that this is the kind of tariff that will be can be allowed, and the tariff can support only so much investment. So the cap on investment or capital expenditure for the distribution companies came about through what kind of retail tariff can be applied in the market. And as I said, it's not nearly enough.
Over to you now.
Yeah, the 5 years plan, should we publish it or should we not publish it? As regulator, what's submitted to us by our regulated entities are regulatory information given to us. They are not meant for publish. When they publish, we want them to publish it on their own. We cannot publish it on our own. We do not publish their, for example, the annual report. We don't publish their financial reports. We haven't published it where we think it needs to be published. Now, what's the value of the 5 years plan? It's not just the way what people go and see on the board and say, okay, this is where you want to be, can I go there? No, that's not. We want to see what amount of investment is unable to make in the next 5 years. What kind of assets they are going to acquire in those 5 years, which will then amortize over the lifespan of those assets. So you know, as if you invest 7 billion now, you must get 7 billion within 5 years. No. Because some of those assets you're going to buy are going to last for 20 years. So we will not ask you to recover the whole of those, the quantum of investment you have made in 5 years. No, that's we're going to look over the lifetime of those assets. And then that's how generally each of those assets has lifespan attached to it, and the amortization of those assets determine what amount we expect to spend from those assets put together to form your revenue requirement, which is now what from the days of tariff making. What you didn't do, what amount, that deficiency, that difference between what you planned and what you didn't do, the quantum of money that you have used to do that, and the investment you're supposed to have made from that will claw back from your investment, your next plan. So it's like you're giving the sector a debt of investment. I want to buy 50 transformer, I only bought 30. So next time review, we are actually going to 20 transformers. So we'll claw it back into it. So that's how we put on the tariff. So we're not going to defend the customer by showing them what they want to invest. No, it's a way of showing that if customers are not given what they are supposed to be given in the next 5 years, which they have been paying for over the years for the organization, we will now claw that amount back from the tariff. So the tariff, instead of going up very high, will be moderated by that amount of investment that we claw back. That's how so we need that as a regulatory tool to check their investment. We do not put it as a requirement for them to put it on their website, but we put to see, okay, this is what they want to do, because there are other conditions that make them not to do some of the things. We know which ones we allow, which ones we don't allow because of what we are permitted to do as regulators.
Thank you. Now, this conversation is for the purpose of mini grids. Now, let's assume if anyone wants to know where which village is going to go to next. Now, Kano Disco has submitted their 5-year plan. How reliable will that information be for planning purposes to Ifeanyi and his investors who want to invest in the mini-grid?
Okay, let's take from the other side. The investor goes to look, is going to prospect for where he wants to invest. He comes to Nigeria, maybe he's not from Nigeria, or he comes from where any state comes to Kano. Say, I want to go to Kano and invest in Kano. The first thing is start to find out, think of where are the leaders are not investing in Kano, don't have to in Kano. Not where this go to be. Where are the places that are not fully identified? Luckily, RBA has a list of that, courtesy of a project sponsored by JZ. They have a list of unidentified communities, clusters are potential areas for investors to go. Now, if they find any name in the RBA list, and is it still available or have they been identified in the last survey, simply call them and ask them. I want to call it no objection request. You just send us a note, which is on the form as a form, just send us or just a letter. I want to be in so village for mini-grid. It is available, it's not already identified about 5 years plan. We'll check our 5 years plan with this will to us. If this kind of upgrades is a 5 years plan with us, maybe it did something last year or our own what is 3 years ago, what is it? Is still remaining. So we'll use that. We'll okay, no, that is not part of it, go ahead and invest, that's all. So you don't have to wait to go to the school or see their plan, because that's also a business information they have, which is their own business secret, they also do that. So once you give us the name of the village, we can tell you whether you should go ahead or not go ahead, because that's really identified or not.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to go back to Ifeanyi and before I come back to it. Now let's imagine that, according to current regulation, apart from the whole 5-year plan and all of that, the next important thing is in the interconnected mini-grid space. There is a clause that says, whenever the grid comes to where the mini-grid is coming to, that the DISCO has the option of buying over the value of the asset as at that time, plus 1 year revenue. Now, we're not even discussing whether 1 year revenue is good enough based on whatever financial model that is there. What I want to ask Raul right now is, that's a provision. When you get there, are you as a DISCO committed to buying the assets at the depreciated value that the developer has put up in there, and also committed to paying the 1 year revenue without saying, oh, we haven't met our provision of the year or our target for the year? Are you committed to that?
We are committed to abide by all the regulations that are applicable. Quite frankly, it works in companies like TV and others. If you come to develop a mini-grid in Kano area, we'll support you, definitely. Okay? And we'll leave you alone so that you recover your capital, you recover your investment, and your return on investment. And we can work out a model where we will not take over your area until you are willing to leave it alone and go over yourself. That is another model that we can work with. We are not, because again, as I said, we don't have enough power to serve the people that we have already connected right now. Okay, and in the foreseeable future, I don't see a major shift happen that will, make us, go to every area, nobody else can operate. No, it's not going to be like that. If you do come with any project plan, whether investor funded or grant funded or whatever, we are willing to work with you. And if the regulations provide that at the end of X period, if I'm going to approach that area with our own connectivity, and then we are obliged to take over your assets that are on ground and pay you 1 year's worth of revenue, you will obviously follow.
Okay, before I throw the conversation open to the audience, I would just want to come to Carol. Now, Cardinal Disco, representing the Disco, says they're willing to abide by, Cardinal Disco, they're willing to abide by the regulation as it is. How do we need to incentivize project developers, funders from global experience and generally, such that so I'm looking at this as a passionate Nigerian who just wants every household to have light so that we can start to really develop the country. How do we incentivize the project developers to go into these underserved or unserved areas and quickly be able to take up the opportunity that exists without the fear of losses in investment or whatever has been the mitigation factor?
Okay, that's a very good question. And it's also, it's a very, very complex question, yeah? I can tell you, based on our experience, what made investors comfortable to invest in the pilot projects that we supported during the first phase. Actually, two of the projects were GV, but other companies also benefited from it. The process starts with an open competitive process, yeah? An open competitive tender to select project developers. These project developers need to be credit worthy, and the projects that they have selected need to be viable in principle based on a business plan. That I would say is the condition sine qua non. Yeah? Once you have done that, yeah, you can have the public sector, be it local or international, establishing agreements with these companies to support them in developing the projects. These agreements can include different types of incentives. It can be indirect meaning, for example, the government will provide at no cost certain regulatory approvals. It can be direct, it can be a capital grant to cover for part of the capital investment of the project. Actually, from our side, we covered these capital grants for the pilot projects that we supported. We arranged it in a way for the regulatory approval so that the project developers didn't have to pay any of them. So there were PPPs or MOUs established with the state government so that the state governments provided for the land, civil permits, and then on the federal level, we also discussed with the Ministry of Environment on the simplified environmental impact and social impact assessment. And actually, in the end, it was provided at no cost to the developers. We also supported the developers or the projects themselves, rather, because this was not for the assets that the operators were providing, but rather our assets with import duty waivers. This is another way that the government also could support these projects. At that time, there was no, the military regulation was not operational, so this is why the project developers didn't have to go for the military permit. But these are the ways for the public sector to incentivize private sector. When it comes to interconnected mini-grids, the thing is that here in Nigeria there is no experience. Imagine that these projects will be a bit easier. One of our main lessons learned from the first phase is the generation assets of a mini-grid. If you were to deploy them somewhere and just sell in bulk to an off-taker, of course, it is a viable model. Yeah? It is just the model that is being done everywhere, through a PPA with on the on-grid side. The problem in the mini-grids, what makes things very complex, is the distribution assets. So those for the distribution assets, it increases the capex. In the case of interconnected mini-grids, for example, since there is no this cost of distribution that needs to be included in the upfront investment, I'm imagining that these kind of projects could be much more viable. Then you will have also much more hard data on the consumption patterns of that community. That information is crucial in financiers. Yeah? Any kind of capital investor or financier or something like this, they will always tell you, is this a greenfield or a brownfield project? If it is brownfield, it will be much easier to sell it to them. And they will also probably provide also the finance at a lower cost, yeah? Which will anyways benefit the whole project. Just one more thing on the finance side, and this is our experience from the first phase as well. We also supported developers, we provided technical assistance when it comes to access to finance. Our main lesson learned for the moment is local commercial banks, and maybe if there is someone here from a local commercial bank, we can have a discussion on this later. But they are not ready to go for this kind of projects yet. You need to go for other type of finance. There is alternative finance there that is willing to take risks with this kind of projects, like crowdfunding platforms. And we actually facilitated some of these agreements during the first phase with some of the projects that we supported, including GP.
Okay, for all the project developers who are in the room or investors, one of the things that's come out of this is rather than being afraid of interconnected mini grids, is actually what you should start shopping for right now, because they are brownfields and they are easier to maintain, and you have some kind of hard data and consumption pattern.
My friend, my comment might not be friendly, so please just allow it. I think it would be good if such information like the 5-year plan of this goes is made available. I know there's freedom of information. I don't know if there's any lawyer in the room that can advise us. Truly, I mean, if I can call for information of the federal government of Nigeria, I don't think this information should be made public. Because as a developer, that means I have to go to the bush, waste my time, find a site, and then come back to NET again to confirm if that site is not within that 5 years. So it might be nice to find a way of making this available. For Mr. Raul, thanks for the show of hands-on fellowship, right, to GVs. I just want to tell you that for us in the industry, we are collaborators. We are not trying to take your space. The Bible will say, you don't want to go, and you don't want people to go. I feel that's what this goes as doing now. You have partition, Nigeria, and then we're not seeing electricity, and you're not allowing us to go. So please, let's extend this to other colleagues in other districts. I like the way you have extended the kind of fellowship. Carlos, you have done pretty well, GIZ, for this industry. But I stumbled on a 101-page World Bank document on the Vietnam experience, on how they were quickly scaled. I think you also need to do more by also ensuring that the space is further made better than what it is now. And then at the end of the day, when we're coming here next month, we will know that we've added some, megawatts of energy to the rural community. We can't keep waiting every month, arguing forth and back. And people are not seeing electricity. Thank you.
This space, can you promise us that you will take the lead in ensuring that this 5-year plan becomes available in a way that is readily accessible? And I'm looking at them as I'm talking to Carlos. So that in a way that is readily available, so that, like Sheikh said, we won't have to come to, because you see, the way it works is this: that money spent to go to the bush, to look for the site that may or may not be available, will eventually be transferred to the consumers at the end of the day. And if the first village fails, then that fund will go to the second village, and then the tariff will keep going higher. And you have the information, so just make it available from day one. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Just a few questions to the technical board. You mentioned about not having enough energy generation. My thought would be, why are you willing to work with project developers who are willing to come in to generate, even though you have infrastructure in that space already, generate and feed to those areas where you already have your infrastructure? That's one of them. Another is, okay, You mentioned something about the 5-year plan and how your investments, how you plan the tariff based on the capital you bring into the business. My understanding, just like the moderator started, the whole idea 5 years ago was like a telco, bring in your money, expand the space. But that seems a little not like what is going on right now. I don't know how we're going to do that, but just like the moderator also said, we're passionate, we want our people to get power, and so it's a big concern. To GE, just this good question. Your experience so far. Trust me, a couple of us want to go in, but the realities in terms of economics, going into a village that you know they never had power, and now you're talking about you won't get cost-effective tariff, definitely. They used to R1, which is 4 naira, and definitely we know what PV and the likes of alternatives will bring about. How's the experience been so far? What are the lessons learned you're willing to share? Thank you.
My name is Montes. I'm with Mahmoud I remember I read a report by IE. They said the mini grid market in Nigeria is about $9.2 billion. And also the mention of there are about $350 million US intervention by the World Bank to see how we can actually boost the mini grid in Nigeria. My question is, yes, we know, like my village, I'm from Plateau State, and we don't have light in my village. For the past 25 years, 26 years I've been on this earth, I've never seen electricity in my village. And for anyone who wants to take electricity to my village, and who's expecting to, I know the level of poverty in my village, that's what I'm saying, and who's expecting to have, let's say for instance, to have a return of investment in within 10 years or 5 years, I don't think it's possible. And that's the sad reality in most rural areas in Nigeria. Exactly. So we need to my mind, I think, aside from asking investors to go there and invest, we must make sure we have the enabling framework that can actually make sure government can, if not just subsidize the whole thing, you know, the same thing they do for the East Coast. Thank you.
My name is Aidu Maki. My question goes to the CEO. From a revenue point of view, is there any way you can remove certain communities within your network? Because some communities, you cannot actually get any return on investment. You can't get your revenue from those communities. Especially in Abuja here. So people are in Abuja, but they are in one locality, people from Jiwa. How do you collect your money from them? Why don't you remove these people from the network and provide them with a mini grid? That reduces your stress. Those effective customers who have, can meter them and now make your money.
I'm of Association for Public Policy Analysis. I'm coming from the angle, when the European Union man spoke, he spoke about the social problems. And in Nigeria, these Abuja-based policies we make, without getting to the real citizens and the communities, NEC has put Nigeria into trouble. Let me tell you, governance, electricity governance in Nigeria, governance is about making the rules and enforcing them. All we hear from NEC is making the rules. Enforcement is not that. For instance, you're asking a 5-year plan. Where is the evaluation report or impact assessment report of the disclose from when they started till now? Why will you just ask the disclose, bring it to us? How do you trust them that they will give you what is required? Where is the issue of transparency? Now, community approach to financing this mini grid is very, very possible. Nigerians are people that are dynamic and willing to cooperate, but the governance system of the electricity sector has been most unfair to consumers. There is no consumer approach. If you watch the discussion here now, for instance, I know that SME operators in some clusters can key into this mini grid and finance it, but do they have the information? There is serious disconnect between them in Abuja and the state ministries and local governments. We've taken up this argument with them severally. They prefer traveling from Abuja themselves and getting the hotel and the TV or whatever, and then they travel to one zone. 2 zones in a year, NEC will go to only 1 or 2 zones, and they say that's having Nigeria. Whereas to have ministries of power ministries of public utilities, ministries of commerce, you have the local government councils, and they will tell you that electricity is in the exclusive legislative list. But when the facilities of the discos are spoiled, they begin to look for community people to help them.
Thank you.
And then finally, when you say cost reflective tariff, how do you determine this cost reflective tariff? Do we have consumer enumeration report? How many consumers have meter? All the unmetered consumers that discos exploit, who knows how much they get? There should be audit of how much discos make from unmetered consumers before you can lay claim on this tariff that is not cost reflective.
Thank you.
Because where they exploit the consumers and there is no report anywhere, it's not fair, and there is no consumer forum for them to even discuss at the local government level or community level.
Mini-grid developer, which carved out actually as a CSR initiative just to provide a model that works. But along the lines, we got involved through the facilitation of the Bank of Industry with Deloitte, who did the feasibility study with bank working on our expansion. And we saw the other side of it. As of date, we have conducted assessment of 300 communities across 4 different regions of the country, and that has given us enough confidence to invest or to raise and invest close to $5.2 million USD of private capital. Of these communities, we consume very limited power. So, what they actually look at is how much is my pocket at the end of the day. So they don't want to know what the kilowatt hour and the lights. All they want is flip on the bulb and the light comes and know that. So, and if you can also consider the cost of not having power, I will tell you, for instance, some of the communities with electrify, we've seen like 10x growth in productivity. We've had significant influx of businesses and also people from various parts of the region come into these communities to actually set up their businesses, because hosting one of the worst of one of our customers, these are where the lights are guaranteed 24 hours, 7 days in a week. And because of that, they are willing to pay a bit more of a premium to actually get this reliable service. And still on that as well, even though the easiest example I usually use, even though petroleum products are, for instance, petrol costs about 145 naira or 143 to 145 naira in urban areas. In these communities, because of several factors, the landing cost of these products is, in most cases, 60 to even 100% higher than this. So somebody using a petrol generator in these communities tend to pay a lot more for get basic electricity services. So for them, it's actually an incentive to roll over to the mini grid to save them about a factor of 1/3 or 1/4 of what they used to spend on alternatives to have reliable service. And that also is rolled onto more productive uses to help better lifestyle. And for the gentleman from Plateau, we have 2 mini grids in Plateau. Our biggest mini grids are actually in Plateau. We have a very good relationship with the Plateau State government. We actually are planning on doing more. So maybe I would like to communicate with you after and I'll see what we can do about that. Thank you.
Yes, over to you.
I'd like to first address the issue of which came up again for publication of the private plan. Like you said that you do have a right to information. As of now, the discourse are structured as very, 40% of the discourse are still publicly held by public entity. Under the right to information, you have the right to query BPE or the 40% partner, because they are still a government entity. Because the other 60% is owned by private investors. we are not like, I mean, the private investors are not obliged to publish their plans, right? But you can, as I said, you can still find out what's going on by you can query NERC and query the Bureau of Public Enterprises and whatever. So you can get the information over there, and like you said, how do we measure what we have done versus what we initiated, let's say 5 years ago? As I said, somebody said that, you know, the new owners of the discos are supposed to bring in loads of money and invest. The new owners bought 60% of the shares of those companies. The funds needed to be raised by those companies. Okay, even no investor can raise money for a company that is, or whose balance sheet it looks like it's going to go bankrupt in the next 6 months. Okay, it's virtually impossible. The privatization model in Nigeria was adopted from the one that was done in Delhi because of the success of that model and how losses were brought down from nearly more than 50% in 2002 to around 8.5% now. The key essence of that privatization model was conveniently left out here. For the first 5 years, the state government of Delhi provided a subvention of nearly $1 billion valued at in those 2002-2003 exchange rates. Nearly $1 billion up to 2007 through subsidizing the power purchase cost. The discos were allowed to retain the full 16% return on equity that they were promised under the Act. That is what enabled those companies to raise huge amounts of money to invest in the network, make it more reliable, invest in metering, replace literally all the meters. And we achieved 100% metering. The best part of all this is that, you know, again, other Indian experiences will also teach you, you don't really need privatization, do you? The private sector entities are not the one with the least losses. There is a company called Andhra Pradesh Eastern Power Distribution Company. It's a wholly state-owned distribution utility, which is more or less like you know, the utilities that we have here. It has a mix of rural, urban, industrial customers, everything over a very large area. Their losses as of 2017 is 5.14%. It shows the government's willingness to invest in the company, to make it modern, to appoint people as to manage the company in the most efficient way and make them fiscally responsible, fiscally accountable to the public. And that's how we will bring about change. It's not just that you know, you hand it over to a bunch of investors and you expect them, okay, now these investors will bring in money. Doesn't matter how the company looks like. No, the company has to look well. So that's how you know, things would work out. So publication of 5-year plan and this thing has really got nothing to do with it. But I agree that we should collaborate with mini-grid developers. We are willing. I don't know why other discos have declined, as you say. Some of the discos are not willing to work with you. But up north we are. So you're most welcome.
Okay, let me ask Carlos to respond before we come to the resolution.
Yeah, like three points very briefly. Rahul, really, it's really like this. You know, I really like you because not all the discos are as open as Cano Disco is. They are all of them are open, and this is a reality. We have also experienced it from our side. Just 2 points, also so that we can tell you a bit what we are planning from our side, which also is aligned with what we have discussed today. From our side, in the first phase, we were supporting 5 states with a lot of electrification planning, not much on data collection. Then we realized actually that the data that we were using for the electrification planning were a bit outdated and inaccurate, and from there this phase We have established specific units on electrification planning. Actually, my colleague in charge of it is here with us today. And that unit will focus on data collection, data management, data dissemination through the platform that we are currently setting up with the Federal Ministry of Power, Works and Housing. So it will be a website where a lot of information will be posted on many things, including, for example, where the load is, the consumption is, on-grid and off-grid. And we also expect to be able to publish some data on the grid to the extent possible. And I think from there, one of the things that we could discuss is what is the level, what would be an acceptable level for the discourse. Yeah? I also understand that some of this information, some of these assets are critical, yeah? Critical infrastructure for security purposes. You cannot disclose this information. But there may be a level that is acceptable for you so that we can still publish some of this information, and this can guide a bit mini-grid developers, for example. It's something that we will be discussing with you and the other discussing in the future. Second point is when it comes to like scaling up. I think that was more like your question, how to scale up. Yeah, you have done some small projects here and there, how to scale up. From our side, we are a technical cooperation. We do not do financial cooperation, which is really the one that goes very, very big. Yeah. But from our side, we supported the piloting of some business models for mini-grids during the first phase. We will be supporting the replication of these models during this phase with a bit more of money than for the first phase. So the first phase we provided access to electricity to about 10,000 people in collaboration, of course, with the private sector and the government. This phase, we will be doing it for 100,000 people. But in addition to us, there are many others that are coming in with much more money. We hope that what we have done, that our experience will help them as well to design their programs faster, and that they will be replicating much faster, and also avoiding these mistakes that we did during the piloting, of course, yeah? Because doing these mistakes on the pilot level, maybe the margin of mistake is not that much, it's negligible, but when you speak about larger amounts of money, the mistakes become much more serious.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to just make some corrections on the idea about deregulation. You are allowed by the law to do mini-grid as individuals, as states, or CBOs, community organizations. So nobody is training you as a community to engage in mini-grid development. So if a community association decides that they want to have mini-grid in their village, they can design one and get the permit and do one. The education is not exclusive electricity, it's one. So both states and federal can make effort on getting power. So it's not exclusive. They can make. Then the idea of the cost, the cost of mini-grid being high in an area where the economy is poor. Self of that, we think that they're going to remain the way they are. Like, if I said, the economy of the village will definitely grow. Once you have electricity in those places, their capacity to pay will increase, and they will have more disposable income to actually pay. So it's not, don't assume that once you put power there, they won't pay because they currently are poor. No, they are poor because there is no opportunity for them to increase their business skills now. Now, in terms of enforcement of our regulations, I'm monitoring the this plan. Every month we receive, we have a KPI database where we have some key performance indicators we get from this push to monitor what they are doing. Their losses, their new customers, the level of metering, all that they get from. So we're actually monitoring the AI. But now I said that eventually this information will be related to a decision we're going to make when we're going to review the tariff. You plan to do X, Y, Z, we'll give you a tariff of this amount, and in order to make that investment. If you didn't make it, we're going to claw it back from your tariff as well, because this is not what you're doing only in one short time and forget it. It's a long-term business. So if you don't do it at this first set, when we are going for next time review, we will draw it back. So we are monitoring it. In fact, there is investment report we get every quarter, number of transformers, number of end of lines, number of poles. We get all that from the discourse every quarter. And currently there are been assets enumeration that they will be targeting so that IW can sit down and see which new transformer is on board, which new something has been built, which length of line has been able from our office able to see that once they are in the tag. So monitoring is going on, and we will continue to monitor more closely. However, I will urge you, like you have said, you cannot guarantee investment if we cannot guarantee that they're going to recover their investment. That's private sector for you. The model is that they will invest, or the regulator must guarantee that they're going to recover the investment through tariffing. So, and also through you paying your part of the game. I mean, you pay your bills. So we urge all of us as Nigerians to pay our bills and make sure that we make the sector viable so that they can expand and give us more better service.
Now on this side, how many questions do we have? Because I know my time is fast coming. Okay, so one.
Fine. I want to know how you're able to sustain the project beyond the life of the grants that you get, the funding for the donor partners or the partner that you work with. That's for you. Then for Yusuf, Dr. Yusuf, has the Commission considered the viability of solar energy? Did it consider it in the plan for electricity for Nigeria? And if it did, how has it been able to incorporate this, in the 5-year plan for the discourse, so that we can have, like, even for those, communities, smaller communities who are not able to connect to the national grid? Is this a plan for this kind of communities? I mean, using solar energy there.
Okay.
Investment and Sector Development Department. First of all, I want to tackle my friend Dr. Yusuf. This issue of mini-grid, I don't think it's for rural areas only. As an investor, I tackle a lot of investors, and they do come to me in the area of they want to invest in a mini-grid, but especially those in what do you call it? These rural areas, and but most especially the urban areas. Thank you. The renewable energy people, they want to generate and wield their power to their customers. However, they have an interface with the discos who want to rip off all their profits. What I want to ask you now is that, what do you want the investors to do? Because most of them are shying away from investing in mini-grid because of the discos. Because the discos want to frustrate them and make sure they don't succeed. And they have come to me in most places when we go to some forum or fora, and they just will want to complain and there's no solution. They will say they've gone to NEC, and NEC will tell them, meet the discos, and discos are not ready to cooperate with them. And this is affecting investment in that aspect. Thank you.
I'm working mostly with developers, and I've found jobs for the World Bank and for GIZ. No. Now, I've got a couple of points to make. First, Luis Carlos, your exposition there, I think, was very good, and I agree with you about the point about the only engineering difficulty being on boundaries between mini-grids and the main grid. For you, Dr. Yusuf, I'd like confirmation that whether somebody has a license, a permit, or anything else, your NERC safety rules for electricity still apply to them. Thank you. Now, Engineer Raham, you mentioned that you delivered 350 megawatts to customers. DCN, in allowing you to do that, was taking a risk. I would only allow you at maximum 320. You only have a single 330 circuit coming up from Kaduna. And if that trips at 300 or 320, the circuit from Kaduna to Zari will just about survive. And we won't trip the grid.
We are forced to take that kind of look.
The second thing is that you have at least 3 solar power projects, 2 up in Katsina, 1 over to the east, and I'm not sure of the one on Sokoto link, whether that's in your territory.
I'm aware of one, the large project in Jigawa, which is
80 megawatts?
It's
80 megawatts.
That's no solar. I've been involved in all this.
Because the state government is also closely involved.
Yeah.
And we are also trying to support.
They have all got, obviously, PPAs. They also have grid connection agreements I help negotiate. They're waiting on PCOAs. And they're in the lead here. If the government goes ahead with the PCOAs, you're suddenly going to get 280 megawatts in the daytime.
Right.
Nothing else at night. You've got to, and I think the whole of sub-Saharan Africa over time has got to consider this. You've got to consider daytime tariffs and nighttime tariffs. And Dr. Youssef, you have to consider this as well. Thank you very much.
There's one house.
I work with backup lighting technology. My question goes to Mr. Raul and Dr. Yusuf. I still have an issue with the 5 years development plan we'll be talking about the communities that the mini grid operators are not meant to operate in the 5 years development plan. Because I remember vividly that Mr. Raul clearly said that there are communities where they are currently underserved and they have no power, and he also said that the funds allocated to them also is not even able to give meters around. And when you move around, you also see a lot of vandals, vandalized distribution networks around. So my own suggestion is, why don't these 5 years development plans work in providing sustainable, stable power to these underserved communities, and leave those communities that the discourse things are viable for this, for grid extension, and let us, the developers, to give electricity to these communities, because for the discourse to think those communities are eligible to have grid extension, it means they are commercially viable, they have numbers of commercial and productive users, and therefore will be more beneficial to we, the developers, and also to our investors.
About 2 weeks ago, the Minister of Power did say something about scaling up the 1 megawatt to at least 2 megawatts. I don't know what's NEC doing about it. I know it's a policy thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response, Mr. Morris, and your questions as well. As I said, the 5-year plan, it's a plan that was made 5 years ago. But like any other, somebody said about the best laid plans of mice and men, right? Things don't work out exactly well, right? So it's a fluid thing, it keeps changing. What gets done, what doesn't get done, it keeps changing. And I believe in the current year we're going to see a holistic reset of tariff, as NERC has been saying. And I believe under those circumstances we can have a more realistic view of what projects can be done, what projects should be taken up in the future. Because first of all, we need to stabilize supply to all our existing customers, reduce the losses, have enough investable surplus to go out and reach other communities. And I think that, under the current circumstances, there are enough opportunities for many great developers to come and work with us, to provide, reliable power in the interim to a number of communities. And as I said, we are committed to abide by whatever regulations are applicable at that point. And I've already said we are quite open to developers coming to us, and we will definitely work with you for developers.
Thank you very much. Let's put our hands together for him.
Yeah, the question was asked about the viability of solar. Solar is viable and it's going to contribute so much to Nigerian energy supply system because it's available everywhere in the country. The amount of solution in the country is huge. And the model of taking it is different. Some will be on grid, some will be off grid, but that they value. If you go to on grid, the inclusion on the grid supply and the tariff and even the stability of the grid will have to be considered. While off grid, they will be done according to the size of the supply and where it wants to be. So they have to vary on different scales. Then in terms of the mini grid in urban areas, there are many people who have come to us, they want an estate, so please, my estate doesn't have enough supply, I want to mini grid there. And that's not what the mini grid is. There are some people that need 2 megawatt or 3 megawatt, 5 megawatt mini grid. The mini grid is for 1 megawatt and below. Once you have 1 megawatt, come for a license, generation license, either as a better generation or an IEDN, or the regulation exists. But you don't the benefit from that kind of regulation of mini grid because it was meant for small players whose economics is so weak and fragile that we need to actually do the scale the bar for them to fly. So this is why it's different from those who want to electrify estates in the area. We did not say you do not electrify anything within the 5 years plan, but only with the content of the disco. Because the disco is already going to be there. We have captured that in this investment plan, and we are already paying for it entirely. If you're going to take it off from them, then we must take that part of their capex off. So you need to get the concept which will now use as a basis for taking from their capex. That's why we need that confirmation from the district that, okay, I plan to be here next year, but now I've asked X, Y to go and find that place. That is what we can confirm. So we're not able to identify that. Then those who permit safety conditions. The regulation says all suppliers, whether permits holder or registration holder, they must conform with the safety conditions. It's only the only way you are doing that easy is about conforming with the different codes in terms of length of lines, side of your poles, or kind of poles. You are not going to use wooden pole in my mini if I'm not a registered operator, I can do it. But if I'm going to be maybe a permit holder, I must follow the distribution code. And so at the point you come and take it over, they can operate. But everybody must be safe because small power can kill, not like black power can kill.
Speak to the minister's pronouncement.
I am not the minister. No, I don't have an opinion on that because we are operating on the Act. So if the Act changes, we will go back to that. So that's why I'm not to talk about this.
So the minister is on his own for
when the policies are made, net make regulations to align. Now the Act stated the threshold of registration on licensing. Now we said those below 1 megawatt, you are going to get permits. The Act allows NEC to also vary even that threshold. So if the NEC decides to vary the threshold within the Act, it's allowed. So it depends on what policy want to implement. So it's not that these are right to say the policies, and NEC has the duty to look at the policies and look at the Act and form the vision to make it work. All we need to have it to go.
Okay, so quickly, Carlos, your last word.
Yeah, for this panel, I was a bit dubious about its conclusion, because there was going to be a mini developer and a disco in the panel. I didn't know if they were going to start really fighting each other. So, I mean, from my side, it has been very nice to have this dialogue and to see also that there are a lot of discos that are open dialogue, to exploring different possibilities to provide access to electricity to their in their regions with other solutions like mini-grids and everything. And I'm really looking forward to exploring these possibilities together with mini-grid developers, with the discourse, and of course always in collaboration with the government. And I would also say one thing. We are all part of the problem and the solution at the same time. Each time that I go to one event, the DISCO representative and the regulator representative get roasted, yeah, literally. What I would say is, for the DISCOs, I didn't have the privilege to work with them over the past years, but I've been working with the regulator a lot, and I can tell you how much work they put into this thing. Yeah? They are really, really committed to this on a personal and professional level. So I would also like to also really state it, because it is really commendable what you are doing.
Thank you very much. Let's clap for that. Your last thoughts before this session wrap up.
Okay, before I do my last, I think I have one question. First of all, I want to state categorically, GBD, we are 100% for profit. And even though we started out with grants, and that was quite understandable because it was a very green field. So we needed some free capital to test out. So we needed some grant capital to actually develop the model, but having done that, we're now gradually evolving. In the recent round, which we're currently working on the first phase of our expansion, which is deploying about 0.65 megawatts of solutions to about 16 communities across 6 different states. Through a total capital investment of 3.5 million USD, and the grant component of that is just about 18%, and we've been working with several investors like Alon, the Bank of Industry, who have been doing very amazing and awesome job towards helping bridge the gap in this sector. So to share my last thought, I think maybe the way that it's been going, a lot of people actually feel developing or running a mini grid is more like a very easy stuff to do. But just consider having all the challenges being faced by the GenCos and also the DISCOs.
And even the transmission companies.
And even the transmission and some sort of the issues around generation, distribution, building, all that. So you have to be very adaptive to change. You have to be very innovative to actually meet up with the requirements and actually meet the space. So it's very exciting to actually hear that kind of discourse is very effective, and we hope to also get that kind of relationship from some of the other discourses in the country. And I would also commend the next team and also all the other players in the room, and also the REA. Very official, they've been doing a very amazing and very exciting job to solve some of the challenges we're facing as a country and as a sector. And also, I think as a sector, one of the critical things that we need to consider is transparency in the sector. There's a lot of divide between what is actually obtainable to what Nigerians in the grassroots actually need. Because like Nigerians, they have a lot of expectations without knowing what happens behind the scenes. So people tend to be a lot more transparent. You know, Nigerians are very accommodating. They actually know what is involved in, and most of the very tedious work that's going on behind the scenes, I believe will be a lot more receptive to helping us achieve where we are going. Thank you very much.
Okay, so with this, we come to the end of the session. Thank you for being very wonderful, interactive audience. I want you to just clap for my panelists as well.
I'm a research analyst with Nextier. On behalf of the Nextier Power team, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for being here with us today. We thank our efficient moderator, Mr. Ayodeji Odeji, for this session, and our dynamic panelists, Dr. Abdulsalam Yusuf, Mr. Luis Carlos Miro, Mr. Ifani Orajako, and Mr. Rahul Singh. Thank you for taking our time to share your thoughts and perspectives with us. We as a company understand the frequent challenges affecting the power sector in Nigeria, and that is why our commitment to dialogues like this is very much pressing, particularly in recent times. I would also like to thank the audience. You all would have been elsewhere this evening, but you chose to share this time with us today. We really thank you for that. To the members of the press, thank you. On this note, we look forward to welcoming you to future events as we keep the conversation going. We also invite you to keep an eye out on the Nigerian Electricity Hub newsletter, which shares information on recent happenings in the sector. We still have drinks in the other room, so please stay back. And the network is limited audience. Thank you very much.